Hello everyone, welcome to the second edition of the Gurumantra podcast, and here is your Guru Charan Kumar. Today, we have a student guest speaker, Mehar Singh Oberoi, who scored 7 points in the ESS and 42 points in the final IBX. Mehar, welcome to the Guru Mantra podcast and please introduce yourself.
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful introduction. So, as sir said, I'm Mehar Singh Oberoi and I scored 42 points in the IB. I've been studying at Pathways from grade 6, so I've done both the MYP and the program at Pathways. I'm going to the University of British Columbia in Canada for my undergraduate, where I'll be studying the Bachelor of Commerce program under the Sorter Business School. So that's broadly my introduction. And on a personal level, I enjoy watching cricket. I'm someone who's really into music and movies, especially Bollywood. So that's pretty much about it.
Very good. So we will start with a question from the paper 1 ES. So can you tell me, Mehar, how important or reference to the data booklet while writing the answering the question?
So, sir, in my opinion, I feel that references to the data booklet are the key to scoring a 7, especially in paper 1, because not only does it add more value to your answer, but it shows that you have in-depth knowledge about the topic you're talking. So, for instance, while we answer a particular question that's related to a particular data set. So, if we use references from that data booklet, it always adds an impression that you know what you're talking about, and you have enough knowledge to support the content that's been taught in the class. So, it's not just a bookish knowledge; it's more real-life scenarios we can add, because the data booklets are all about real-life scenarios.
Good. So, how did you tackle the questions that did not directly relate to the resource booklet on the paper 1?
So personally, sir, I had a lot of challenges with these sort of questions, because I was easily able to answer those which were directly related to the data booklet, because I could directly reference the set number. But in such questions, the strategy that I applied was try to use the knowledge that we gained in class and the knowledge that I gained through reading other case studies. So, for example, the case studies that you had given us, or the ones which are in the book, or on ESS Gurumantra, I read through those, and if there was any part which I could apply from there, I tried to use that and find out some link between the case study that we've previously studied and the one in the paper, and I tried to link it somehow using some ESS concept. So that's how I tried to bring in amalgamate both the ESS concept as well as the data booklet in my answer.
Good. Practice makes the perfect. So how do you precise and specific in your answers of the paper 1? Because paper 1 need a technical term. So how do you precise in your answer?
So like you said, I feel technical terms or ESS terminology is the key here, because if you're using ESS terminology, like you said, we aren't beating around the bush and we're talking exactly about what the question requires us to talk about. So I think to keep our answers precise and specific, the most important part is to use ESS terminology wherever we can and not general terminology, so that we can focus on what point we want to emphasize on. Another strategy that you suggested us was making pointers and labeling them. So instead of talking in a generic sense, we put in pointers. So for example, there was a 3-mark question. I remember you always emphasizing giving at least 4 to 5 points or even more in that answer. So I think that is one way where we could make our answer very specific and not talk about more general stuff, but talk about more relevant stuff to the book.
That's a brilliant. Mehar, I always see your dedication in the class. You are one of the very dedicated student in the class. So that's the reason why you got a ESS in the 7. So I want to know from your experience, can you tell 2 tips to study paper 1 exam for the grade 11 students to get a 7?
So sir, like you said previously, practice makes perfect. I really believe in that, because I think the more you practice from past papers, you're only going to get better, because with ESS, the content might not be as tough, but the questions and the way of answering is very different to other subjects. So I think practicing different past papers is one technique that I use. Secondly, before practicing the past papers, I feel that being thorough with the concepts is also very important. So for example, studying through your PPTs, we could just understand all the broad ESS concepts. So once you have the hang of the concept, you can easily apply the knowledge in different places and link different ESS concepts. So that's those are the major 2 things that I did to study for ESS, and I think that was the
brilliant. So now we move on to question related to paper 2. So Mehar, can you tell how do you choose between the essay question in the section B?
So sir, I think the 9-mark questions are the key, because what I did was I usually, for example, in our paper as well, out of the essay questions, there were 2 essay questions, or I believe 1, which I did not understand at all. Like I knew the less marker questions, but I did not know the answers to the 9-marker question. So I considered the 9-mark question is the most important, and whichever question I feel like I can answer well, and I have enough real life data to support my answers. So to support, for example, if I've read a case study about a particular topic which is being asked in a 9 marker, I think that is how I select my 9 marker, and as per that I choose the essays basically.
Very good. So, Miguel, I have seen you all your essay question answer throughout 2 years, starting from looping back, summative, formative, and then a trial one, mock examination. So, you use some kind of the strategy on essay question to get a full mark. So, can you tell what was your main strategy for attempting paper 2 essay question in your ESS journey?
So, sir, I think there were 3 main things which I kept in mind. Firstly, in paper 2, I believe that we should always answer the essay questions before answering the short answer questions. And this is something you've emphasized on a lot of times also, because those are the questions which carry the most marks. So I think doing the essay questions and giving maximum time to the essay questions is very important, so that you can plan out your answers well and you're not in a rush. So I think planning out answers the second point, especially your 9 markers. So dividing it into an introduction, body, and conclusion, and making sure you have enough pointers. So basically enough ESS concepts that you're using in each answer. I think that is very important to score well. The last part is using a lot of, I'm going to emphasize on it, using a lot of ESS terminology. So I think the subject related terminology really gives a push to your answer. So sometimes even if you're not sure about what you're talking about, or what the question is actually demanding, if you're sure about what you are writing, I think that can really put a good impression and get you good marks.
Brilliant. So, how to make your essay question unique from the others to get a 7 in the paper 2?
Sir, so I think there are various resources that you need to use and you need to study to ensure that you have enough content, like your website, the book. All of these resources help you, I think, get to a 6 level. But what I felt, what made the difference for me and my previous answers where I got a 6 and the ones in which I got a 7 was, I think, the case studies where I used. So every time I use a case study to explain the concept, ESS concept. For example, if you're talking about different habitats, so if I give real life examples about for example, the lemurs and all of them. So if I use real life examples, I think that really pushed my answer, because that was what I felt was different from the others, because I studied a lot and I put a lot of emphasis on reading the articles you sent us, which are all about real life case studies that are happening in the press.
Yes, I still remember you are the only one always asking, sir, where are the links? Where are
That was more for guessing the questions.
Question also. after some time, I have stopped because of that. So Miguel, ESS paper 2 is always a critical thinking, especially on the essay question. I have seen a lot of critical thinking for you in the class. So can you tell what resources did you use to enhance your critical thinking for paper 2 and also in subject in general?
Sir, so I think the one thing I struggled in the beginning was knowing what to write in an answer. So this was a strategy which I adopted, was reading the mark schemes of a lot of past papers. For example, there were some which were on your website and some through the IB past papers. I read a lot of mark schemes, so especially for the essay question. So what that helped me was to understand what the question wants from us. So through that, there were different angles. For example, if there was a question asking me about a particular ESS concept, I saw in the mark scheme that there were different ESS concepts they were linking which were not ours. And that, I think, that is something I adopted, and I think that's what came across as the critical thing part of it, because I was not just sticking to the scope of the question but thinking beyond. So that is something I tried to do and emphasize on in my 9 markers, especially towards the end of each body paragraph. So that is something that really helped me in enhancing the critical thinking part.
Okay, that's good one. There are many grade 12 students currently. They will struggle to get a good mark in the paper 2. But I have seen how you developed your answer on the paper 2 throughout 2 years. So can you tell 2 tips for study for paper 2 for the DP ESS student?
So I would want to give 2 tips to write the answer, because I don't think there's too much you can study for it except the basic knowledge which you study for every paper. So I think what really matters for paper 2 is how you structure your answer firstly. For example, making sure that there's a clear introduction, body, and conclusion is a very basic step that you need to keep in mind. Secondly, even between each body paragraph, making sure you have different points which are labeled as not necessarily labeled as in point number 1, point number 2, but they're clearly defined that there are different points and different concepts. I think that is something you need to really take care of. And secondly, tips for studying, again, I'd say that stick to the articles that Guru Sir keeps sending and explore because Guru Sir is filled with a lot of knowledge. He keeps giving us some or the other real life thing which is happening around the world, and it always has some ESS aspect to it. So what I usually do is I always went back and researched either in class or at home about what Guru Sir was talking about, and I always found out some interesting facts which I used to use in my paper too.
Right. So reading outside the book, outside the classroom is very important to get a good score in. So now we are moving to the next one, ESSI. Miguel, I still remember, I think from the class of 2022 ESS, you are the only students have done the IA based on the researching experiment which you have done it in in your house. Initially, when you started, I had a doubt, will you able to do or not? But finally, you got an excellent mark in ESS, IA, especially you got a 7 in ESS. So can you tell me what was the best source to gather statistic and factual data for your ESS IA?
So for me, because my IA was more based on primary research, I think my main point for the statistics was the primary notes I collected from my experiment. But from what I gathered from my friends and peers around was, I think, Statistica, which one of the resources which was really good for statistics, and also governmental websites. So each government has their own environmental pages, and I think statistics from there and facts and figures about different aspects like the yearly rainfall or statistics about wildlife. I think picking up from either governmental websites or Statistica, it's not only credible, but there's a wide range of resources from which you can pick and you can add to your IA, because the more statistics you have, the more mathematically oriented your IA is. It always shows off as more in depth or more researched.
Good. So can you tell how a teacher feedback helped you in the ESS IA to score higher marks?
So you know how many times I came to you for my feedbacks. I think I've gone to Guru sir at least 10 times for proper feedback and unofficial feedbacks. I don't remember. Every class, at the end of the class, we were having a conversation about my IA. So I think a teacher's feedback is one of the most important things, because sometimes we may get distracted. We may go in a different line, which is not actually what is needed for the IA, because we can either go too much in depth in a particular thing, or our research might not be very broad. So I think the first role a teacher has, at least that Guru sir had for me, was deciding the research question itself and how specific it has to be, because my original research question was quite vague. So I think and if I would have continued on that, I don't think I would be able to form a proper conclusion for my IA. So that was the first point. Then secondly, I think structuring the IA and organization is also a very important thing. So I remember Guru sir gave us a checklist of each criteria that we had to fulfill, and every time we used to not fulfill criteria, there used to be a cross on that, and then he used to give us a kick to go ahead and make sure that every criteria is fulfilled. So I think that was another major role that you played in my IA, and obviously motivating us time and again, because IIs are such a lengthy process and an ongoing process that sometimes I kept losing motivation to work more on it. And I think working again and again and all the feedbacks is the most important thing to get a 7 in the IA, because it's an ongoing process. So I think motivating students is also, Guru sir does it the best.
Thank you. Yes, I still remember all those days. So can you tell me how did ESSGurumantra.com help you in the process of getting a 7 in the ESS?
So starting off with the IA, I think there were a lot of sample IAs that you put on the website, and that helped me knowing again the structure and how to structure my IA, because the words were very limited and the content I want to put in was a lot. So I remember we were, I think, 5,000 words above the word limit initially. So reading through those sample IAs and knowing how to make my IA concise was one place where the ESS website really helped me. Secondly, generally, I mentioned seeing the past papers from their case studies and different question papers that you uploaded. So there were topic-wise worksheets which you were given. I didn't necessarily solve all of them, but just having a look and reading through them and how to answer questions really helped me. So there were annotated answers for different questions, I think, and that really helped me in knowing how to answer the questions, because that is the most important part of ESS, because I don't think the content is that difficult. It's more the presentation which is the harder part. So that was another place. Then lastly, I think it had a lot of interesting articles and videos that you had collected and put in. So that really increased my interest in the subject. So it made me want to learn more about, just general environmental aspects of the world, whether it would be different facts about fishes around the globe or about aquaculture or about any part of ESS, which I was originally not very interested in. I think the videos really helped me to get attracted to the subject in general.
That's a good point. Thank you very much. So there are many students, they want a 7 in ESS IA, 25%. That will help to increase the entire percentage. So can you tell your grade 12 ESS student 2 tips to get a 7 point in their ESS IA?
First, follow all the steps that Guru sir says. Never try to ignore any part that he says. So every feedback he gives should be taken very seriously, even if it's as small as changing the font size, because that plays a very important role at a later stage when you have so much work that you don't have time to correct the structure of the IAS. So I think firstly, follow everything that your mentor, for me, Guru sir, suggested. So every small feedback. And secondly, I feel like making sure your IA is focused and very ESS oriented, because sometimes our IAs might, because ESS is a subject which is very interdisciplinary in nature, sometimes the IAs might lean towards a more biology IA, like mine did in the start, or for some of them a more chemistry oriented IA. So making sure the IA has enough ESS terminology and ESS concepts is something that you should it's something that I learned the hard way through external feedback, but I think you should keep in mind and make sure that the IA is ESS centered electric main.
So, Miguel, we have last couple of questions. So, I want to
Yes,
know one important question. So, what is the one factor which makes studying ESS unique and interesting in comparison to your other IB subjects?
So the best thing, I mean, the way that the subject was taught was very different in comparison to the others. I think that, I mean, more than the subject, I would like to give credit to you for that, because whether it was a different presentation or the quizzes, I don't think we did so much of that in the other subjects. It was more content based, but ESS was more about, you know, just learning about the world in general. So I think that's something which made ESS unique, and it was not a science. So I am not a very science person. So for me, it was like an interdisciplinary subject where I could learn different things about different aspects. It was not just limited to, you know, for example, climate change. There were different aspects about, there was water, there was different cycles, there were different habitats, and I mean, we studied about a range of things. So I think that really that was one thing which was unique. So it wasn't limited to a particular subject point, but it was limited to different age. It was not limited.
So, Miguel, last question. So, can you please tell our audience about your next journey, where you are going, what you are going to study, country, city?
Yeah, so I'm going to Canada. I'm going to the University of British Columbia, as I mentioned earlier, to study the Bachelor's of Commerce. So I plan to specialize in finance and economics if I get the grades for it. And right now, the plan is to do investment banking in the future and something around investment. So that's my forte, and something in that aspect.
Brilliant. So, Miguel, thank you very much for taking the time and coming for the ESS Gurumantra podcast and giving all your perspective, views, the 2 years journey of the ESS. And then behalf of the ESS Gurumantra podcast, we wish you a fantastic future and amazing career studies on your next journey. Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you, sir. It's really great being here.